Welcome, everyone. We have another amazing speaker today, Dr. Zsófia Clemens from Hungary, and she's a neurobiologist, the director of the International Center for Medical Nutritional Intervention. So, welcome, doctor. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you for the invitation. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. And first of all, I want to know exactly what is a neurobiologist, and in addition to that, how did you get involved in what you're doing right now? Did you have a personal health problem that led you into this, or how did you get so involved in what you're doing?
So it's a long story, back to 10 years.
Okay.
So the long story short, yes, originally I am a biologist. And specifically, I'm a neuroscientist. But I have always been working in a clinical setting, actually in top institutes in Hungary for neurology, epilepsy, psychiatry. So this was my environment, but I was always mostly involved in doing research work in clinical settings in patients, and that involved analyzing brain electrical activity in epilepsy patients, sleep, and how this relates to memory processes, sleep-related memory consolidation, for example. So I've been around this topic for several years. And then I started some research about vitamin D specifically. Actually, I was involved in the study that was the first of its kind, giving vitamin D3 to epilepsy patients who had uncontrolled seizures before and also had low vitamin D levels. And we looked at how normalizing vitamin D level changes seizures, epileptic seizures. So this was the first step towards the nutritional field, and then I became involved in other aspects like brain structure related to vitamin D, personality traits related to vitamin D, and there were many more around the vitamin D. And then I stepped forward and I became interested in nutrition as a whole, and I know that there is a lot of interest around vitamins, specifically like vitamin D, but I had to realize that the nutritional context as a whole is much more important than single nutrients, single vitamins, for example.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I brought you on, because you're in clinical practice, which is a huge difference between someone just doing research in a lab and never had any experience. They just graduated in their PhD and then they've never worked with actual patients. So until you do that, you really have not applied these ideas. So
yes, makes a huge difference because there are a lot of material around on the internet, and it is very easy to set up theories and own ideas and own suggestions, but if it is not confirmed by clinical data, then it may not have a validity.
That's right. I want to dive right into a very specific topic, intestinal permeability, and exactly what that is. And maybe you can we call that, generally speaking, leaky gut, a problem with like a leaky gut?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And the relationship to autoimmune disease, since a good portion of our immune system is right past the border of our intestine. Tell us a little bit about the link between these two topics. And there's a lot of questions I have. I just want to, maybe you can give a little introduction and then what occurs when you have that break in that's those little junctions.
Mm-hmm. So the intestinal permeability is a membrane-related phenomenon there are membranes all around within the body that are connecting and separating spaces within the body. And there are also others that are separating us from outside the body. And the intestinal membrane is one of those membranes. And actually, it is one of the most important ones because that is the primary barrier between the content of our gut. So actually, the foods that we are eating and the rest of the body. So that is a primary location, and a lot of things are determined here. If we are eating certain food items that we are not supposed to eat, then a leaky gut and increased intestinal permeability will develop. And if it is already there, then there are certain food items that may be the same or may be different from the ones that actually resulted in the leaky gut. But these food items can go across the barrier, and they may get into the circulation. And then if this has occurred, they may form certain complex with surface molecules of certain cells within our bodies. And if such a complex is created, the immune system may start attacking that complex because the immune system regards this complex as a foreign molecule.
There's a certain part of your immune system that is actively trying to suppress autoimmune reactions, right? It's a T cell that's trying to prevent that. I think the T helper cells, aren't they? And somehow, I know, for example, in like psoriasis, there's a higher amounts of, I guess it'd be like Th17, giving you these cytokines and this cascade of inflammation. And now you're in a situation where your own tissue is attacking cells of the skin.
Yeah, so the thing is that so far you keep eating those bad food items, the whole process will be going on. So, and there is no other cure for this than eliminating certain food items from your diet. And then the whole process can attenuate. And I'm not a scientist at the molecular level. I cannot tell you whether it is T helper cells or not, or to what extent are these involved or not. And I guess nobody else can really tell this because nobody looked at specifically certain dietary context. Mm-hmm. So that there may be a very different situation if you are eating a high carb diet, and another one if you are fasting or doing a low carb diet. So it is the diet itself that matters, and you do not have to think about T helper cells, or you do not have to be an immunologist, PhD or whatever.
Right. The only point I brought that up is because there is one nutrient that tends to suppress that reaction, which is vitamin D. Again, we come back to vitamin D, which is interesting because it tends to modulate inflammation in your body. Question I have, as far as you have a very specific diet or eating plan, which is very beneficial to people with autoimmune. And it's not carnivore, but it's a kind of a paleolithic version of keto. Explain that.
Mm-hmm. Just going back to the vitamin D point. The thing is that I don't believe that vitamin D alone is enough to counteract the inflammation process or psoriasis. It is the elimination of certain food items that really matters. If you do not eliminate, then you can have a skyrocketing vitamin D level, and it will not help.
Absolutely. And that's the problem with most people. They don't change their basic eating. they think a pill or a drug is going to do it, but that's like it's kind of an altered sequence. You first have to fix what you put in the body before you even deal with some of these remedies.
Yes. Okay. So the other question, how this diet differs from the classical ketogenic diet.
Yes.
This is your question.
Yes.
So it is only the ratio between meat, the protein, fat, and carbohydrate that determines whether you are entering in ketosis or not. This is very simple, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It is very simple to induce ketosis if you eat the right amount and the right ratio of these macronutrients. But creating ketosis is not enough. It is not enough. It is enough for something. If you are aiming at losing weight, improving body composition, improving blood sugar, hypertension, then ketosis alone may be enough. But if you have an autoimmune condition or if you have cancer, then ketosis alone will not be enough.
Mm-hmm.
I am not saying may not, it will not be enough.
Right.
And that's something that you have to keep in mind, that any ketogenic diet will not be enough if you are struggling with a specific autoimmune disease or cancer. And this is because the composition of your diet also matters, not just the macronutrient composition. And it is only a diet that is based on meat, fat, and organ meats that is effective in combating such conditions. If you are eating a classical version of ketogenic diet, let's put it in this way, that is containing vegetable oils and dairy, which is the case with the classical ketogenic diet, or there are other MCT oil-based and other ones, but all are based on unhealthy vegetable oils and dairy.
Let me define the classical for those people that don't know. There's a lot of initial research on using what's called the classical ketogenic diet for epilepsy in these children, where they're not looking at the quality of the product.
Exactly.
So you're doing like this mayonnaise and whipping cream and all these I consider bad quality foods, and even though it's low carb, it's going to be a problem. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And here we come back to the intestinal permeability issue, because such a diet, the classical ketogenic diet, is not able to normalize intestinal permeability. And if you do not normalize intestinal permeability, the whole process will be going on. And this is not out of theory. What I am saying, we see this being measured in our patients in course of their diseases.
Is there any there's two things going on? You have the elimination of things that irritate and cause inflammation in the gut, but you also have, is there any direct healing factor of either certain organ meats or saturated fats on the intestinal lining itself?
No, these are separate things. So there are certain food items like milk, vegetable oil, grains, nightshades that are creating intestinal permeability. Medicines as well, or anti-inflammatory drugs have a huge effect. They are creating intestinal permeability, the leaky gut. And if you have the leaky gut and go on eating grains, milk, potato, and so on, then that will create inflammation in the body. That will create an increase in the inflammatory factors. So the inflammation is the end result. And you cannot interfere with vitamin D. You can only interfere with elimination.
So when you switch your diet to what you're doing right now, you're eliminating the irritation, the stimulation of this inflammatory process.
We are eliminating those factors that maintain the leaky gut. And as a result, there will be a decrease in the inflammation and the symptoms, and eventually curing disease.
Love it. And so, can you give my viewers an idea of like examples of types of foods? Because you're not going to be doing low fat protein. You want to do higher fat proteins. What would be some examples of that?
So, speaking of cancer, not this is not aimed at your general audience, maybe, but specifically those who have an already existing disease, have undergone chemotherapy, radiotherapy. So the possibilities for them are very narrow.
Yeah.
Okay, so for these people, there is a core diet, which only includes meat, fat, and organ meats.
Also autoimmune patients, right?
Also autoimmune patients, yes. Okay. So they do not really have another choice. We would love to pleasing patients, saying them that you can introduce this and that, and but it wouldn't be in the interest of the patient. Because what such patients need is to restore normal intestinal barrier, because they do not have time to lose. They have to do it as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And once that's done, then reach their, I used to say they baseline, they own health baseline, and condition has stabilized. They are without medications, symptoms, and so on. Then they can think about, or we can consider allowing for introducing certain food items. But this shouldn't be grains, this shouldn't be nightshades, and a lot of things shouldn't be.
And what, like you would probably find some higher quality grass-fed, maybe fatty sausage or liver or other foods that are higher in obviously fat, because it's actually, I find it's really hard in the US to find fatty protein nowadays at the store. It's like you have to go out of your way because everything is so lean and
this is absolutely a cultural thing. This is not a problem in Europe. We grown up eating grazy bread, which is obviously not the best combination of foods, but fat was incorporated heavily in our diet. This is not the case in America, because fear has been feared for so long time that you didn't even came across. And so this is a cultural thing. I think we have a lot of good food items, sausages that are already containing meat fat in a good ratio, and or bloody sausage or many other traditional food items. And most of these food items are coming from pork, which here in Central Europe is more widespread than the beef, actually.
Interesting.
And it is also of higher quality than the pork is in the US.
I can imagine. Yeah, because I actually consume a lot of pork, and I know a lot of people are saying, well, that pork is dirty. Well, I don't buy it from the grocery store. I do the farmers markets where people that I know they don't feed them certain things. But pork is higher in fat. It's higher in nutrients, actually B1. I feel better on pork, especially pork sausage. What about the fish and seafood?
So the diet, the PKD core diet, is based on meat, fat, and organ meats from four-legged animals.
Okay.
Specifically because it is more complete in nutrients as compared to the fish or any fish or seafood. So there are certain minerals that fish is very rich in, but meat, fat, and organs are containing the entirety of the nutrients, and at the same time usually not as polluted as the fish or the seafood.
Fascinating. And what when you take your clients, you probably have people coming in flying in from around the world probably. And when you see them, they have all sorts of autoimmune issues. And what are some of the barriers that you run into? I mean, this is probably a drastic change for a lot of people, but I'm sure that they're motivated and they're like, hey, listen, just tell me what to do and I'll do it, versus the typical person that is, not very motivated.
Yes, they're more motivated than average patients, so they are already familiar of the concept. So, and many are coming from the carnivore society, so they are already not eating a lot of food items. It is only the ratio and the food amount that should be fine-tuned, and cutting out a few other additional stuff that may not allow for a perfect recovery. But so, we are in content mostly online, specifically in these times.
Oh, good. How would you differentiate carnivore versus what you're recommending, which is paleo ketogenic?
So the carnivore diet, in most cases, not resulting in ketosis. So those who are following an undefined carnivore diet are still running their body on carbohydrates instead of fats, despite not eating carbohydrates.
Tell me about that. Explain that.
Yeah, so an average people on a carnivore diet is eating 800 to 800 grams to 1.5 kilograms of meat or something like that, which is a huge amount that put a lot of pressure on your digestive system because the volume is too much. You are not in ketosis, you are still producing glucose from the protein that you eat. And overall, it is an ineffective way of obtaining energy.
So I want to clarify just for my viewers that even though there's no carbohydrates in protein, if you have excessive amounts, the body's going to take a good portion of that and break it down into glucose.
Yes, because there is no other way to obtain energy. You can have energy either from carbohydrates or the fat. The protein is not good for energy, and you need the energy. What you eat is basically for covering your energy needs. It is also a very small amount of meat that you have to eat to cover the protein need.
Okay, so that's a big difference. You have it's way too much protein, and then I'll just let you continue. We're going to mention something about the fat.
Sorry, I didn't get your question.
I cut you off right in the middle. You were talking about the difference between carnivore and what you're recommending.
So the difference is that if you are following a carnivore diet, you are still running your body on glucose, despite the fact that you are not eating carbohydrates at all.
Right.
So it is not resulting in ketosis. You will not benefit. You will not have the benefits that are coming from the ketosis alone. You will have the benefits of not eating plant food items, but that's only half of your benefits. You also need to be in ketosis, because if not, this state is not sustainable in the long run. And this is what is happening with patients. Initially, they feel relieved from their symptoms. They start enjoying having more energy, or skin symptoms going away. So there are certain benefits for sure. But as time is going on, the negative consequences will prevail over the positive ones. They will be running out of energy. They will be fatigued. They will have digestive issues, diarrhea, dry skin, and there are many more. that develop over a longer period of time.
Interesting. So bringing down the protein to what do you normally recommend as actual protein?
We used to do a 2-week follow-up for patients because there is no one general suggestion, but it is much less than people used to eat.
Okay.
And then we are in a closed loop with patients on a day-by-day feedback. They are doing home measurements. They are sending their home measurements every day. And then we are giving a suggestion day by day. You should be decreasing, you should be increasing. So this is a matter of fine tuning.
I like that.
By the end of the 2 weeks, they will end up having ideally good amount of food and good ratio. And
then as far as the fat, you have to raise the fat, or else what else are you going to raise? So what's the ratio maybe of protein to fat? So speaking of dry matter content, it is 2-to-1, 2 for the fat, 1 for the protein. And that's weight, that's not calories. This is dry matter content. Okay. Macronutrients. If we translate it to food, that is about 100 grams of meat, an average meat, that goes along with 35 grams of added fat. So this is the basic ratio. Because when you're eating protein or animal meat in its normal form, does it come with the ratio of that much fat, or do you have to add fat? You have to add fat. Right. So you can't just go on what nature is providing, because we actually have to put your body into a different. But nature is also providing fat. It is just not entrenched in some cultures, you know. Got it. Interesting. You do not see, just because you do not see fat itself at the butcher, it doesn't mean that nature is not providing the fat, you know. Right. And we're not talking about avocados, even coconut oil. We're talking about like paleo. And what about ghee? Ghee is a form of dairy that is containing milk proteins that is triggering autoimmune processes. Even when you clarify it and get rid of the solid materials? Yes, but because you cannot get rid of all the molecules. Okay. Okay. You do not have a laboratory. Right. It is simply technically not possible. So you have to go with tallow, or in Hungary you can do smoked slab, which is the actual fat coming from the actual fat tissue of the pork. And there are a few others. You know, also you have something like bacon, but the problem with bacon is when you fry it, like all the fat goes away. Yes, but so you have to eat, the fat goes away. Right. Right. And so for those people who are listening and that are confused because it may conflict with some other videos that I've done, we're talking about people that are addressing that have intestinal damage, autoimmune, other conditions that are going to react with this. But so I just want to clarify that. So can you give us a couple more examples on, like, let's say organ meats? Would that have enough fat? Or like maybe a pate, right? What? Pate, which is kind of a... Yeah, if you prepare based on your own recipe, then it can contain enough fat, of course. Yeah. So the fat is predominantly coming from the visceral fat of the animal. And for example, beef is not containing enough fat. If you take the whole animal, specifically those breeds that are designed to be lean, that's for sure. So you have to specifically go for the fat that is cut of the meat that is sold for other clients. Right. For example. Right. Now, let's say someone has autoimmune. I know there is a test that's called, I guess, PEG 400, which is a lab test that you you drink something, it gets filtered out through the kidneys or the intestines and the kidneys, I guess, and you can pick up some data. Tell me a little bit about that.
Actually, this is an old test. You can find the references in the literature back to 1970s, 80s, 90s. So it has been used in the medical world, or at least somewhere in the medical world. But later on, they forgot about it, mainly because they didn't have a solution. So anybody they measured had a high intestinal permeability, and they asked themselves, what can we do? We can't do anything about it, so let's stop measuring it. So actually the methodology was given, and we started using the test. There is a laboratory in London. The laboratory is called BioLab, and we first collaborated with this laboratory. We sent measurements to them, or the samples, but then we started doing our own measurements. And in order to do so, we have furthered the methodology behind it. A critical point of the measurement is clarifying the sample. And this is a very critical point, critical methodological point. So we have been working a lot at this point, but now the methodology is furthered and it is working very well. So patients can actually buy, they can purchase this test even from the US. They do not even have to come to Hungary or anywhere else. They are getting the test material that is containing the PEG in a small container. They have to drink the small container, and then they have to collect the urine across 6 hours. And then a small sample should be sent back to our laboratory, and then we do the measurement. And the recovery of the PEG in the urine, the percentage of the recovery will show the extent of the intestinal permeability.
So basically you have these compounds that are going through the body, and if there's a hole through your intestine, you're going to have more of them on the other side versus less, and you could be able to get feedback on what's happening in your gut.
Yeah, so normally there should be no PEG molecules going through the intestine, or at least very minimal. And if there are PEG molecules crossing the barrier, getting into the circulation, being excreted in the urine, it means that there is a permeability. And it is not only about having a permeability or not having a permeability. It is 11 different size of PEG molecules that is to be found in the solution. So it is giving you a resolution across the molecular sizes. So at the end, we have a certain curve or pattern of the recovery percentages for each of the specific molecular ranges. That is carrying information. And so far, the curve is higher than the range that is regarded as normal. It is regarded as the patient having high intestinal permeability, and it is expected that with following the PKD, the intestinal permeability curve goes back to the normal range, or actually closer to the low end of the normal range. If it is not happening, then there's still something that is preventing this. And this is where the small details may matter, because there are small food items or even medicines or even certain supplements that can hinder the normalization of the intestinal permeability.
Fascinating. I recently bought, and I'm looking through and studying a book that is talking about vaccine-induced autoimmunity. What's your quick summary on the people getting a vaccine and all of a sudden ending up with an autoimmune condition?
Yes, that's a big topic, and I do think that there is definitely a connection, because by injecting the vaccine right into the body, you are bypassing this actual intestinal barrier. In the same way as having very high intestinal permeability. But this material is getting into your body, into your tissues, and if it is already there, and that can provoke autoimmunity. And this is something that is frequently the case with the sudden onset type 1 diabetes in children, or sudden onset Crohn's disease, epilepsy, or many other brain conditions. And the importance is underestimated heavily by the medical community, but this is happening.
Yes, there's certain. This book was written in India, so it hasn't reached America. But the other question is, you have vegetable oils like the soy oil, the corn oil, the canola, the cottonseed oil that is permeated through our entire food chain, and which is highly inflammatory because it's omega-6, not to mention the quality, and it oxidizes and it creates a lot of inflammation. Do you think that's a pretty big factor?
It may be that it is not the fatty acid specifically, or the fat specifically, but other components that are coming from that specific plant.
Could it be the glyphosate in the GMO, or other factors?
No, because that is an additive. I'm thinking of the lectin content of the plants.
Okay.
So any plant is containing thousands and 10,000s of different lectins, and some of them are more dangerous, are more dangerous for the intestinal barrier than others, like the soy. Soy is the one that is heavily triggering intestinal permeability, and there are others, for example, that are coming from the carrot, which are not that dangerous or do not have such a big effect. But it is the lectin component, or the ones that are coming from the nightshades, that are really bad for autoimmune conditions.
Interesting. What about, there's a patient that I know a while ago that had, they didn't have any necessarily problems with autoimmune, but all of a sudden they did a colon cleanse and they wiped out everything in their gut for about, I think, 7 days, and they ended up with psoriasis. So I guess there's certain factors in your microbes that actually protect you. When you lose those, it can create an imbalance.
So actually, these greens are not too healthy, I have to tell you. They are using these vegetable or fruit-based juices.
Oh, right.
And while they are doing this, they are not eating the right foods. So the combination is what is resulting in a deterioration of the condition. And also, if you have an already existing disease, it is very likely that you have certain nutrient deficiencies. If you start doing fasting or juicing, which is something very similar, then your nutrients will be further depleted, and you may end up in a condition that is worse than the original ones.
Wow, this has been. Go ahead.
No, there is no need for overcomplicating things. You just have to follow the right diet, and then you do not have to take away anything. You shouldn't add anything. Once you are back to the diet that is right designed for you, then that is the way to go. And people are obsessed with different, techniques and approaches that sound good at the level of the words, but in reality they usually do not work.
I totally agree. Well, I want to thank you so much for giving me this valuable data and giving everyone else this very amazing new viewpoint. I think what I'm going to do is I want to put some links down below of your website and how people can get a hold of you. And as well as maybe I'll even put a link down for that test so people can get more information about that test as well.
I will send it to you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.